Hello, I'm Peter Bell, and I'm here with Mr. Don Lay from Medallion Resources. Hello, Don.
Hi, Peter. How you doing?
Great, thanks. May 17th, 2019. Good to be talking to you. You had some news out on May 1st to start the month here.
Yeah, we did. We put out some important news on our processing development work that we're doing, test work at a couple of places at the Saskatchewan Research Council and the University of Toronto, both of which are sort of the final legs of our bench level test work
Exciting.
to get all that work completed so we could start to look at economic studies for the proposed monazite processing plant.
And the first time that I've seen a flow diagram included in any of the materials from the company. That was neat to see.
Yeah, so we thought it was a good idea to at least present a sort of a top level flow sheet on the process. There's obviously different levels, and there's lots more detailed ones that we've pulled together. But this sort of shows a top level of the monazite product coming in, feedstock coming in, major processing steps and products, and then different products produced, both rare earth products and phosphate byproducts, and waste streams as well. So yeah, it was quite good, quite exciting to kind of
Well,
get
and
that out and talk to people at a kind of a macro level.
exactly, and talking to people, right? It gives you something specific and tangible here to start to put some flesh on the bones of this plan that you've had for years. It's coming together.
Yeah, it certainly is. We had initially looked at the sector on a large global basis when in more heady days of the rare earth element marketplace, if you will. And then over the last few years have sort of really focused on North America as the first place to get processing going. And so we've been doing a lot of work on process development, like flow sheet work, and the bulk of that test work being done at the Research Council in Saskatoon, managed by Kurt Forrester, our metallurgist, and then also just working with the feedstock providers in North America to ensure that we've got adequate supplies available to process and the materials upgraded and available, and then also starting to analyze which jurisdictions could and should it go in, what's the most appropriate, and those sorts of things. So all those things are just part of the business development activities, and we've been working on it a number of years. But I'd say the last 9 months, a year, we've really been able to accelerate it because we've raised additional capital to move forward more quickly. And there's more interest in the rare earth market given the magnet metals and their interest in electric vehicles and electrification in general. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's going very well.
Appreciate the guidance on the timelines, increased kind of specificity there, and yes, it's encouraging to see, especially given all the changes going on out there in the broader world too right now in the rare earth space. It seems like it's headline news more and more often.
Yeah, no, it certainly seems to be, I guess, between China's control of the sector. They would produce about 80% of the world's rare earths. Between that and the geopolitical tensions and people's recognition that rare earths are critical to everything from as I said, magnet metals, which are critical to it, but defense systems and a lot of other advanced technologies. It's sensitive given the geopolitical landscape we're in right now.
Yep. And increasing attention paid to the whole critical materials thing with regards to batteries and stuff with the increased use of electric vehicles out there. That seems to be hitting Main Street more and more as well. So,
Yeah, it's interesting. I was at Benchmark Minerals. The analytical firm was in Vancouver this week and put on their annual show, focusing on the battery materials. So it's lithium being the key one, of course, but cobalt is a very important, nickel and manganese to some extent, graphite. They're really the bulk of the battery demand, or 80% of the future battery demand, is anticipated to be either, mobile or stationary batteries for at least cobalt and lithium, and so everybody's really focused around that, and I thought it was quite interesting because they're really, as UBS, the Swiss investment banking group, is identified as next to lithium and cobalt, it's NdPr, the rare earths that are critical to the electrification, and EVs in particular. You need those powerful magnets to drive those cars. So, and buses and wind turbines and all the rest of it. So yeah, and it wasn't mentioned by them, which is fine because they do focus on the battery stuff. But for listening for 4 hours to discussion on the entire battery, the value chain related to EVs, I found it was interesting that it didn't come up once. But
Really?
it's certainly getting on people's radar. SP Angel, a boutique out of London, recently published a report on NdPr just the last couple of weeks, and highlighting the increased usage given demands from EVs and other electrification technologies that are happening now, and that this is sort of a blind spot in the commodity world, which it has been for a while. So, and when the prices start to move up, then everybody will kind of recognize it, and I think there'll be a re-rating of the industry, and so I think that will emerge.
Commodity markets certainly go in and out of favor, don't they?
They certainly do. Yeah.
That SP Angel, excuse me, that report was amazing. I was surprised to read some of the statistics around the environmental costs associated with the illegal mining domestically in China there for rare earths.
Yes, that's long been the case, and what has also been happening, starting in I think it was 2014, the Chinese government really dictated that 6 of the state-owned enterprises in the mining business buy up and aggregate the rare earth processing industry. And a large part of that was not only controlling the resources and the processing capacity, but also ensuring that the processing was done more cleanly. Because the Chinese are well aware of, they've got a poor record of environmental protection, but they're very keen to change that over time. Of course, it's not going to happen immediately because the population is upset about the pollution, of rivers and lakes and also the air. So their whole thrust towards electric vehicles is sort of twofold. One is to clean up the air so that the people aren't as sick and might not be complaining as much. And the other one is because China's got the ability to be the leading player in the automobile marketplace globally by if they can lead in the electric vehicles. They don't,
Yep.
Obviously the Americans, Japanese, and Germans would dominate the internal combustion engine technologies and markets, but transportation is being reimagined, if you will, over the next 10 and 20 years, and they want to have a big role in it, and so it's a lot of things in flux at the same time.
Yeah, fascinating. An example of how emerging societies can kind of leapfrog over the status quo from prior leaders. I've heard that a little bit before in some examples in telecom and banking and things, but this transportation is potentially a very large example of that, and appreciate you pointing it out there.
Yeah, well, and that's part of they published a paper, I think it was last year, called Made in China 2025. So it's in effect their blueprint for becoming the dominant manufacturing powerhouse on the globe in 2025. And they're already a huge manufacturing powerhouse. I don't know if they're the world's biggest. If they're not the biggest, they're number 2 or number 3, and certainly growing faster than anybody of size. And much of that is around encouraging other sectors like robotics and things like that would automate the processing, additive manufacturing or 3D printing. There's a number of different things the Chinese are pushing and encouraging from a top-down perspective, and funding in some cases that will enable this to happen. So they really, see sort of themselves as the workshop of the world, much like America's been for 100 years and Britain for the 100 years before that. China kind of sees this as their era to dominate that, and we see a huge opportunity in providing alternatives on the rare earth side to Chinese dominance in the rare earth space. And certainly the automakers are starting to pay attention to that, and certainly the defense establishment, for example, and others that require rare earths in their equipment are paying attention. So I think our story in that sense is resonating pretty well now.
I always appreciate seeing you guys as a non-mine solution as well. Something that it's somewhat unconventional maybe for people, junior mining exploration types, right? There's a different development pathway here, which is encouraging again.
Yeah. So as we've discussed before, Peter, our we don't have a rare earth property. We had them before and we explored them, and they didn't come up well. But a number of years ago, we decided to go down the byproduct processing route, and we chose monazite as the target because it's an available mineral. It comes out as a byproduct of heavy mineral sands processing, and have been developing the flow sheet for that as well as the business model to support that. Of course, it's got the advantage that we don't have to explore and drill and assay and develop metallurgy and build a mine and all the rest of that stuff. Rather, we buy somebody else's waste product and process it in our plant, which will be a no tailings facility, more like a chemical plant than a mining facility. And out will come, rare earth concentrate products, phosphate byproducts, and waste streams. And so we're thrilled that we've modeling out this solution that helps solve a critical shortage of materials, and dominance by one power that isn't certainly aligned with the Western countries. So it's interesting project, and but it's not your typical mining company, that's for sure.
Yeah, wonderful. Maybe a couple quotes from the SP Angel report that jumped out on me. I might read them off to you here and discuss briefly. First one being, rare earth concentrates imported by China through 2018 and early 2019 have been largely sourced from Myanmar. However, questions are being raised over potential smuggled material. So this was a report published recently, and already the field has changed.
Yeah. So within China, there's both legal and illegal mining and processing of rare earths. The illegal part of it is shrinking as the state-owned enterprises have aggregated the bulk of the mining and processing operations, as well as government oversight and crackdowns on it. And what they're referring to here is the processing of the South China clays, which are they have quotas on the production and mining and processing in China, but that doesn't stop in certain instances people from doing it illegally. And the Myanmar problem is probably bad material being exported to Myanmar and then being re-imported for processing into China. Yeah. So I think the Chinese government has said, we're not going to let any in from Myanmar. It's dodgy, if you will. And so that's likely happening now. And the imports of other material are going into China as well, some of it from the United States and other from Africa for processing. So that's raw ore going in, if you will. So yeah, there's always lots of dynamics around that, but that particular SP Angel comment there, because of that stopping of that re-importing of material would create a shortage, and so the stock of 3 of the Chinese rare earth companies went up by 10% in one day, which is the limit up for that. So that was kind of what was happening the other day. Always never dull moment in the rare earth space.
It would seem so, yeah. And that's this week. Lots of eyes maybe looking at other things. Lots of other things happening in markets these days. Who cares about rare earths? Niche little area like this, right? Critically important. So.
Yeah, I mean, they don't care until they do, and then that's all they care about. So I suspect at some point in time, it could be some dust up in the South China Sea involving Japan, China, Philippines, U.S., you name it. There's lots of countries down there. And somebody threatens shortages of rare earths or holding back them, which would be China. So that could be one thing. It could be trade tension between the U.S. and China. bring some retaliatory answer. It could be related to defense requirements and threats of
Yeah.
war or other military action. There's all sorts of things that could happen in that, or it could be just the prices all of a sudden decide to move up quickly in response to demand for NdPr for the magnet metals for the EVs, because the projections I saw at that benchmark minerals presentation for EV rollouts were huge in terms of volumes, and each new EV requires about a kilogram of NdPr rare earth metal material in its traction motor to drive the car, and that is going to make this demands for this commodity, virtually double within the next 5 to 7 years. So,
and the SP Angel report from the start of May has some really interesting information on comparing a permanent magnet motor and an induction EV motor, and comparing metal intensity and some of the costs, the economics on them. Fascinating technical detail, critically important here, backdrop for it all.
Yeah, so the intensity is on the magnet side is an NdPr magnet is 10 times more powerful than a standard magnet, and hence you can make the motor so much more compact.
Yeah.
And of course, weight is critical in anything involving transportation. The battery is really the problem today, in the sense that they've got to be large and heavy. But the motor that drives the Chevy Bolt only weighs what is it, 30, 35 kilograms, so 38 kilograms. It's very, very light.
Yeah.
So the energy intensity of it is fantastic.
Maybe one quote again from this SP Angel report at the start of May, mentioning imports in China 10 times higher in 2018 than 2015 of rare earths, and climbing 167% year over year. Pretty impressive numbers.
It is, yeah. So it's long been projected that China will become an import, even though it mines the bulk of the world's rare earths and processes the bulk of them, around 80%. It's been on the lips of many analysts, like say Adamas Intelligence, which is probably the best recognized rare earth analytical group outside of China, that China would need to restart importing rare earths, particularly since they were controlling their own processing through quotas and such. They don't want to lose their resources, so they're careful about making sure prices are managed and production quotas are managed so that they've got that the resource lasts a long time. That they feel that's critical to their economy. They don't want to give away the resources cheap, which they felt they did for many, many years. So now, however, with the demands for material, particularly NdPr, and considering China's got a lot of processing capacity, they're importing certain ores, including monazite from some places, into China and processing it. Some of the ores coming from United States, Mountain Pass, California, which is the old Molycorp mine, is shipping ore to China for processing. And so you got to imagine there's a lot of folks in the U.S. that aren't happy about that, but that's what's happening. So it's we live in interesting times. Also, some material from Africa that's going in there. Of course, our model is different. We've got an automated process which won't have many people and will be cost effective, and we're looking to process material here in North America.
Wonderful to hear it all. Thank you, Don. Mention of Molycorp again in that SP Angel report. I hadn't realized that 20.5 million US Molycorp's Mountain Pass, the operation was acquired there for $20 million US. And they have some comments in their report too, talking about the operation being stung by tariffs targeting semi-processed output, encouraging owners to process rare earths domestically. Quote from their report there. And that seems to be very much tied in with the headline news that I see on Forbes and the U.S. media regarding the tariff wars, right? And this being a small part of that bigger story.
Yeah, no, it's just one of those sensitive elements. It's sort of part of the mix. Um, interestingly, the U.S. didn't put tariffs on Chinese rare earths coming in part because they don't want to hurt those industries that are using them. The flip side is they don't really have, uh, in part because they don't have any alternatives. So, we're looking to provide alternatives, and we've been working on that for quite a while. So it's kind of an interesting place to be because the sector's got a lot of noise, and I expect it to sort of reemerge with a lot of public interest here at some point in time. When exactly, it's hard to say, but you've been following the story a while, and you kind of hear some drum beats in the distance, and they seem to be getting a bit louder nowadays.
Yeah, I think I came in around the tail end of the last bubble there and have kind of danced close to the exit since then. But at some point, yeah, you have to jump in here and seize the opportunity because the bull will run.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Um, a bunch of other things worth noting and discussing in the report, but maybe just one I'd point out about um, um, trend of legitimizing unsanctioned production being supportive for the Chinese industry, and how taxes um, are being levied there, or proposed to be levied to finance their rehabilitation efforts and associated with past rare earth mining. Just
Yeah. So yeah, SP Angels, they've sort of made some, I think correctly so, and they obviously wouldn't have done it without speaking to a few people and getting, who are close to the situation, and about, including, full life cycle costs and some of the processing of rare earths, so so that they can rehabilitate and clean up some of the problem sites they've got in rare earth processing, mining and processing side of things that wouldn't have been allowed, of course, in mining operations in North America, for example. And I think we're well aware. We've seen the pictures of you know uh,
Yeah.
bad actors or bad behavior from processors in China from different times, and but the government is now cracking down on bad processing and also looking to implement and remediate current stuff, and that will obviously over time, increase the cost of things when the full life cycle cost is included. So that's kind of coming, and that will likely be supportive of our efforts as well, because we're doing it in a clean fashion to begin with, and it's easier to do. It's easier to do it if you do it clean from the beginning. It's relatively easy. If you do it messy from the beginning and got to clean it up, that's expensive. So
Yep.
we just prefer to do it better off the gate, and saves a lot of time, hassle, money in the long run.
Well, and I guess the question that you must face a lot from people who are trying to figure out if there's a good opportunity here with Medallion is the potential scale, maybe, of the opportunity you're facing production side.
Yeah, so that's kind of interesting. In most mining operations, they've got kind of a a scale threshold, if you will. They need to get kind of past a certain size to get economies of scale. Um, and in the rare earth business, for hard rock mines, it typically tends to be $300 or $400 million at a minimum to get a mine that's big enough. Obviously, you need the resource there, grade and tonnage, but to get a mine that's big enough so you could put in a processing system that's big enough to create adequate quantities of material to cover both your variable and your fixed costs and make a profit. And so, at 300 or 400 million at minimum, but many of the projects on the books are 800 million, a billion or more. That's the sort of scale they need. From our perspective, we can start really at a much smaller pace than them. So maybe at 20 or 30% of the volume that they've got,
Yep.
and our capex is a fraction. So in our minds, a plant to process all the available material in North America and produce, say, 2,000 tons of rare earth oxides a year would be maybe a $20 million plant. A similar plant would probably be, 150 to $200 million for a similar mining operation as a comparison. So we're just a fraction of the capex number, and we can scale it up in a linear fashion quite easily
Yeah.
as additional feedstock becomes available from the miners that we look to buy our monazite from. So those are, very interesting conversations because our ability to scale up in the business is very, very capital efficient.
Yeah. And providing some sense of completion for those heavy mineral sands operations, right? Who have that waste product sitting idly, concerns, uncertainty around, the implications that potentially, if government regulations in the U.S. were to change how that stuff could be treated, or.
Yeah, so in the heavy mineral sands mines, they end up with this monazite, upgrading and producing this monazite byproduct. And the thing about monazite is because it's rare earth material, it ends up having some uranium and some thorium in it. So it's, which are both radioactive, thorium slightly radioactive, uranium a bit more so. But if it's sitting there in a pile of monazite, it's not like it's going to hurt you. But it needs to be, stored properly, transported properly, processed safely, the waste dealt with properly. And those are all things that we're working on. But for the
Yeah.
heavy mineral sands miners who aren't after monazite, but end up just getting it as a function of what they're doing in terms of their processing, it's a bit of a hassle because they're in the business of mining for titanium or zircon, and they end up with this material which is valuable because it's a rare earth ore, but also has this radioactive signature that needs to be dealt with. So they could put it back to the pit and bury it over, and that's fair game. That's fine, and nobody's going to get hurt, and certainly allowed to do that. Or they can figure out how to take advantage of it to earn some money, and that's where we come forward as a commercial partner to buy the material off of them, and then process it and deal with it everything correctly and safely. And of course, that's an important thing for them because they're good stewards in terms of their mining operations. They want to make sure their business partners are as well.
Yeah, wonderful. Appreciate it. Mr. Don Lay, Medallion Resources, thanks very much for talking with me.
Thank you, Peter. Appreciate it. Talk to you soon.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.